During World War II, there were many people who joined resistance groups and networks inside of their countries as they fell under German occupation. People tried to do anything they could to disrupt and subvert the Germans, and this included sabotage, destruction of railway lines, passing information to the Allies, and even assassinating high-value local German officers. Inside of France, there were lots of young men who joined the French resistance, and they fought eventually until their country was liberated. But if they found themselves in the hands of their enemies, they usually faced terrible torture and then execution. Many were dragged to French forts, where they were lined up against the side of a building or embankment, and they were then stood opposite the firing squad, made up of German soldiers, who stood with their rifles ready and primed. But shockingly, in 1941, there was a young 17-year-old teenager who was executed, and he faced a terrible execution, and he is remembered today as a hero of the Second World War in France. But what did Guy Moquet do that led to him facing the ultimate punishment at the hands of the German army? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Guy Prosper Eustache Moquet was born on the 26th of April 1924 inside of Paris. As a young boy he went to school and studied as was normal, but he joined the communist youth movement inside of France. Whilst he was a teenager, Adolf Hitler was beginning to plot and plan his domination of Europe, and he would try to take many different lands and countries as part of his empire or Reich. The French alongside the British stood in the face of the Nazis and Germans following their invasion of Poland, and France, after declaring war on Nazi Germany, was more vulnerable due to its proximity, location-wise, to Germany. After Hitler conquered Poland, he turned his attention to plotting and planning an invasion of France. On the 10th of May 1940, Wehrmacht soldiers invaded parts of the country, and then in codename Fall Gelb or Case Yellow, the German armoured units pushed through the Ardennes region, crossed the Meuse River, and then faced down in the Somme Valley, cutting off and surrounding Allied units that were planning to meet the Germans in Belgium. But then on the 5th of June 1940, German forces began Case Red, and they pushed the Allies back further, but then the Germans outflanked the Maginot Line and pushed deep into France, and on the 14th of June 1940, they occupied Paris unopposed, with the French government fleeing, and the French army then collapsed. A surrender or armistice was then negotiated by the French and the Germans, with the Germans then occupying the nation, but they also instilled a collaborationist regime known as the Vichy government, which was led by Marshal Philippe Pétain. So millions were now living either under German occupation or under men who were willingly collaborating with the Germans. Because of this, many people then joined the underground French resistance networks. Guy Moquet was just a teenager at the time and was roughly 16 years old when France fell. After Paris was placed under strict occupation and the Vichy government installed, Guy sought action. His father had been arrested during a crackdown on left-wing activists previously, but along with a number of his communist friends, Guy joined a group who were then involved in resistance activities. He was on the streets of Paris distributing anti-fascist propaganda, but then the Germans sought to put an end to this sort of behaviour. Guy Moquet was arrested close to a metro station on the 30th of October 1940, and it was said that on his possession he had a poem which he had handwritten. This document allegedly said, "The traitors of our country, these agents of capitalism, we will drive them away in order to establish socialism, to get you out of jail, to kill capitalism." Moquet was locked up inside of Fresnes prison before he was transferred to a camp with other communists which were being held at the time. On the 20th of October 1941, the commanding officer of the German occupation forces in the region was assassinated by 3 communist resistors. Because of this, Marshal Philippe Pétain chose communist prisoners to be given as hostages to the Germans, in his words, to avoid letting 50 good French people getting shot. In this there were groups of prisoners who were shot and executed, and Guy Moquet, despite being just 17 years old, was transferred to be executed. He wrote a final letter to his mother, and in this he claimed that, I quote, My darling mummy, my adored brother, my much-loved daddy, I'm going to die. What I ask of you, especially you, mummy, is to be brave, and I want to be, as brave as all those who have gone before me. Of course, I would have preferred to live, but what I wish with all my heart is that my death serves a purpose. I didn't have time to embrace Jean. I embraced my two brothers, Roger and Reno. As for my real brother, I cannot embrace him, alas. I hope all my clothes will be sent back to you. They might be of some use to Serge. I trust he will be proud to wear them one day. To you, my daddy, to whom I have given many worries, as well as my mummy, I say goodbye for the last time. Know that I did my best to follow the path that you laid out for me. A last adieu to all my friends, to my brother whom I love very much. May he study hard to become a man later on. 17.5 years. My life has been short. I have no regrets, if only that of leaving you all. I'm going to die with Tintin, Michel's. Mummy, what I ask of you, what I want you to promise me, is to be brave and to overcome your sorrow. I cannot put any more. I'm leaving you all, Mummy, Serge, Daddy. I embrace you all with my child's heart. Be brave, your Guy who loves you. Guy Moquet had been informed that he was to be executed, and his final letter shows the panic and distress he had because of this. He was just, let's remember, a 17-year-old boy who, despite being opposed to the Nazis, was being given the ultimate punishment. In his final moments, he did not appeal to the French people to rise up, but instead he spoke of his love for his family, and he wanted them to be brave. On the 22nd of October 1941, at Chateaubriand, the executions of the communists began, and this included the young Guy Moquet. He was stood out in a group alongside other communists who had been arrested, and was stood next to an embankment. Opposite the condemned men was a German firing squad stood in their full army uniforms with their helmets on, and they were armed with their rifles. The executions that day would be swift and quick, and the condemned were shot in small groups ruthlessly. A German commander in charge of the firing squad ordered his men to prepare themselves and raise their rifles and weapons, and they all did so. Moquet was stood facing his death, and he probably in his final seconds thought about his family. The commander then gave the order to fire, and the firing squad duly obliged. Their bullets crashed into their targets, and amongst the dead was a 17-year-old French boy who had been condemned for distributing propaganda. Today inside of France, Guy Moquet is seen as a national hero. There are many streets and pieces of infrastructure named after him, and he is viewed as a martyr. He could have been spared, and there were many who were appalled when they found out that a 17-year-old boy had been shot, but it showed the ruthlessness of the German occupiers and executioners, but also how deeply collaborating the Vichy regime was. Petain tried to excuse the execution of Moquet, and others claimed that the French civilians would be executed instead, as a German officer was killed, but instead groups of communists were sent to their deaths. But amongst them was a teenager, whose execution was just one of many. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.